Hello, everyone, and once again, welcome. I'm Dean Hallett, President of Hallett Leadership, and today we're going to jump back into a chapter here in the book, The Missing Piece. But before we do, I just want to acknowledge you because we're actually spending the time listening to these videos that I'm doing and taking a look at your leadership style, how you can be a better leader, how you can show up more authentically, how you can build the best teams, and so on and so forth. You're ahead of the game. Harvard did a study and they actually found that the average age where individuals start leading teams is 30 years old. The average age for an individual when they receive their first leadership development training is 42 years old. So that means that you've got a 12-year gap where people are just shooting from the hip. They're winging it. And you wonder why so many people, I'm sure a number of you have experienced the same thing I have, where you're working for people who are leading you and they have really not developed the skills to do that. Maybe for some people it's more innate, but I guarantee you that these leadership skills can be learned and you could be a more effective leader. So kudos to you for being here and investing the time in you. Today in the book, we're going to talk about Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is, in fact, building the best teams. And in the words of Christine Kane, to build a strong team, you must see someone else's strength as a complement to your weakness, not a threat to your position or authority. We talked a couple chapters ago about showing up authentically, and as we get higher and higher in organizations, we feel the need to have all the answers and not ask for other people's perspectives. The reality is that if we are willing to look at the strengths other people can bring as not being a threat and not having it potentially expose our shortcomings, we actually can build the best team, get a complement of skills, and make sure that we're addressing all the issues that are before us. We all bring different things to the table. When we're willing to realize that, we can actually end up with a team that is high performance. I want to walk you through this diagram, Nature's Evolution Solution, because it shows what needs to happen in order to continue elevating and evolving and being agile and being able to survive in a world of constant change. So we'll start on the bottom where it says early condition. Now I'm going to walk you through a couple of quick examples of this. Early condition, think about a relationship. You're forming a relationship with someone, it's a new couple. Early condition is, boy, they're excited to see each other. Everything is new and fresh. You can go for a walk in the park, stop and listen to somebody playing music, looking deeply into each other's eyes and think, boy, everything's wonderful. And you go on this ascent and it feels like the relationship is just growing and blossoming. And then suddenly something happens. And it may not be suddenly, but suddenly in some ways things start to change. And it could be because one person in the couple says something that the other triggers something in the other person from a past relationship where maybe they had trust issues, and all of a sudden their guard goes up and the communication is just not flowing as well as it did. So you're in a situation where you have this disruption, what's called entropy. Entropy is a loss of energy, as opposed to synergy, which is a building of energy. So this entropy takes place and suddenly things aren't working. As human beings, our initial tendency is to either ignore it and pretend like nothing's wrong, which usually doesn't work, usually just builds up and gets worse, or we can take a look at it and say, you know what, let's just go back to the way it was before. Come on, take my hand, we'll go through the walk in the park, we'll stop and listen to some music and everything will be fine. That typically doesn't work either. Why? Because we grow and evolve in human beings and the dynamic has changed. We are not in the same place that we were before. So we have an option, a third option, which is to decide where we want to go with this. And that is, we can create a new vision. We can decide, how do we want our relationship to be? And we have a vision for it. And we may never get to our vision of exactly, the perfect relationship, but it's something we can always be striving for, striving to be the best that we can. And if we do that, we can come up with a foundation for that by talking about what do we need to keep, what do we need to delete, or what do we need to create new in order to get where we want to go? So we can do that. We can say, look, if we have a trust issue with the other, we're going to sit down, we're going to talk it through, we're going to make sure we put it on the table so we're not hiding feelings, et cetera, coming up with some ways to move forward. Now, I want to use this same chart again in order to walk you through another story. When I first went to 20th Century Fox, I went there in 2001. We had record years from 2001 to 2008 and another record year again in 2009. Everything was working really, really well when you looked at those numbers. And it felt like we were operating on all cylinders, the team was working well together, but then something changed, and really a number of things changed. We got into the period of 2008, 2009. We had the Great Recession, the great economic recession of those years. We also had been hitting those numbers by exploiting our DVD sales, putting more titles into the marketplace every year in order to get a bigger and bigger number every year. And eventually we had tapped out our library. And we got back to a place where we were only as good as our latest film release. So we had these 8, 9 record years where you see us going up this path where from the early condition to the current condition, everything was wonderful. The current condition became very choppy. We lost energy in our momentum and what we were trying to do, and we had to find a new way forward. And we had to look at a number of different things. We'd been able to operate as separate divisions within the organization because that's the way the business had worked. All of the theatrical windows were sequential. Theatrical would release the movie, then home entertainment would release the DVD, then the TV platforms would get the property. Suddenly things were different. DVDs needed to go out sooner. They wanted them earlier in the marketplace in order to be able to satisfy the consumer demand for the people that didn't want to pay to go to the theaters. Netflix was building and putting more properties on television. So we had to be more strategic in how we worked together. We had to form a franchise and brand management team. We had to change the way that we marketed so that we thought about the story that we were telling, about the mythology of some of our movies that had even more than one installment, in order to make sure that we weren't stepping on each other's toes from one division to another. In a lot of ways, we were talking to the same consumer, and if we continued to operate independently, we would step on each other's toes and confuse the consumer, and we might lose them as somebody who was invested in one of our properties. So again, we came up with, what do we need to keep? What do we need to delete? What do we need to create new in order to operate more effectively going forward? Okay, this happened, by the way, this chart that shows going up once and hitting some turbulence and then going towards a new vision. And that new vision, I think, was really being an open, collaborative culture where creativity and innovation could thrive. That was the vision that we had, that we used inside the studio. And making decisions about what do we need to keep, delete, and create new in order to get there is what kept us on that path. But the reality is you go up, you hit choppiness, you come up with a new vision, things change again, it gets choppy again, and you continue on and on, reinventing yourself, being agile, being nimble in order to respond to what's happening in the marketplace. So this is just a snapshot of what is really a very ongoing process in nature. So I'll give you a couple quick examples of how this came out to play and how it ties back into building the best teams. So my son was probably about 14 years old, and we had an interaction one day where things didn't go so well. And he wanted to go storming off into his room and end the discussion. He didn't think he was being heard. And so I went into the room and I said, this is not going to happen in our house. And I have lots of reasons for that. We had an example of a family that fell apart across the street, and he knew exactly what I meant when I said this is not going to happen in our house. But when I said that, I completely broke down and started crying. And he had never seen me do that before. And the message to him was, you are far more important to me, and my relationship with you is far more important to me than me appearing foolish or awkward or stupid or vulnerable or whatever you want to call it. And so when he saw me, his jaw kind of dropped, and he was awestruck that I was like that in his room. So it opened an opportunity for discussion. And so clearly we were using the nature's evolution solution. We were at a point of turbulence and we had an opportunity to create a new way forward. And I said, Drew, I said, I, I know what you're going through. And he said, how could you possibly know? I said, well, let me tell you how I know. I said, when you're standing outside in the street and there's a group of you, maybe 15 of you, and you're standing on the perimeter of the group and you're not saying anything, you're just listening to what everybody else has to say. I said, it's not that you think what you have to say is unimportant. Your mind is completely blank and you don't even know what to say. And he looked at me and he said, how could you possibly know that? I said, because that was me. I said, that's how I was when I was your age. And it didn't work for me. And I want you to learn the lessons that I learned in life, that I've learned in life faster than I learned them. And it opened up an opportunity for a great discussion, which led to several steps for his improvement, both about how he felt about himself, how he carried himself physically, how much he was willing to open up with people. And it really changed the dynamic of how his relationships worked with his friends, with girlfriends, whatever it was. He just was much more open. So it created an opportunity. So I look at having my family be the best it can be as being in the same way that I look at building the best teams. Give you another quick example. I had a person who wanted to be a CEO who I coached. He ended up getting his first CEO job, and he brought me in to do one of our accelerated leadership programs, Hallett Leadership. And he knew that there was an opportunity because he had been working in an organization where things were going along just fine, but he wanted to take a higher level position at an organization. And he walked into an organization where he was coming in as a new CEO. He had people that he brought in. He had people that had been there forever when the company was founded. And then he also had people that were more recently hired before he got there. So he had a number of different dynamics and cultures, and he wanted to bring people together. So again, he felt like he was walking into a point of turbulence in this organization, and they were looking to reach new heights. So he brought us in to do an accelerated leadership program to get people aligned, to get people communicating better, to get people to giving and receiving feedback, to help elevate everybody's performance, to have everybody be more engaged in the organization. And through this process, they were able to create a culture where people understood each other better, found different ways forward together than they had done in the past, and it truly changed the conversations that were happening in the hallways. So this evolution solution and building better teams go hand in hand. It's constantly reinventing ourselves because there's change going on all around us, and we need to be able to be adaptive. Let me give you an quick example where this didn't work as well in creating the best teams. When I was at one of our studios that I worked for, we had a chairman that said all the right things, really wanted to have a healthy debate, have people bring ideas to the table, have an open culture where people could express their points of view and just have an opportunity to be in a supportive environment where they felt that they could have a level of engagement that maybe they didn't have in the past. And we got everybody excited about that. We did a bunch of workshops, got people on board. Everybody was ready for this to happen. And then something changed. Suddenly we had a couple of movies that didn't work quite as well as they did. And we had talked to people about having this open culture and showing up that way and being willing to support each other and help different areas of the company that maybe weren't our specific area, but making decisions that we know would help another area of the company so the whole company could benefit. We talked about wanting to reward behavior like that. But suddenly when a couple of movies didn't work, there was panic in this chairman's eyes and concern that we had to get our movies to open or none of this other culture stuff was going to matter. And so we ended up rewarding some bad behavior from some marketing people that were taking advantage of the situation. They knew that we couldn't afford to lose anybody else in the marketing department. They knew we had to get a couple of movies that were going to release successfully, or things were going to go south pretty quickly. And so there were a couple people in the marketing department that, in so many, so to speak, they there were a couple people in the marketing department that, in their way, took their ball and went home. Literally left the office and went home, and leveraged that for a higher title, leveraged that for a greater area of responsibility before they agreed to return to work. So this chairman had made it obvious that there was panic, and some people demonstrated bad behavior to take advantage of that, and they were rewarded for that bad behavior. And by rewarding that bad behavior, all the things that we told these other people about coming to the table, being the best we can be, supporting everybody else to be their best, supporting the greater good so the whole company is performing better, all went out the window. In an instant, people saw that this was just lip service. And while at some level, maybe this chairman believed it, it didn't really resonate when the going got tough. And so people just lost trust and didn't believe that it was going to happen. So when you build the best teams, when you're looking to find ways to work together to elevate them, make sure that you embrace them. The day I went to 20th Century Fox, Jim Giannopoulos, co-chairman of the studio at the time, came into my office, gave me a big hug, and said, "You're the CFO. You don't need to ask permission to go to any meeting. You don't need to ask permission to go and get involved in any project. You are the CFO and you have access." That made all the difference in the world to me, because that was not the message I received, where I got straight armed by a lot of people at Disney saying, "We don't want finance involved." So this was a breath of fresh air to me, and I knew truly on day one that I was part of the team. So don't be like the chairman that rewarded bad behavior and basically abandoned the team. Show your team how much you care, show them how important they are, and let them know that they matter. Embrace your teams. Develop your team the way you would want your boss to develop you and your peers. Thanks for your time today, and I'll see you next time.